Hello, fiber friends. Today I am going to talk about spinning flax. In our modern spinning community, it feels like flax doesn't get as much attention as wool. And that's a little bit understandable because wool has a lot of properties that make it easy to approach from a beginner's standpoint. But I think that flax really deserves as much of a spot in our spinning repertoire as wool. Because a lot of people tuning into this video, because it's a how-to video, might not be familiar with all of the vocabulary, I'm going to try and explain it a little bit extra as I go along. So first of all, we're going to talk about flax. That is the plant and the fibers from the plant. And then when it becomes thread to be woven, then we have linen, like I would call this a bobbin of linen yarn or linen thread. And then once it becomes cloth, then it's linen cloth. Calling it flax is really for the fiber part of it, and then it's going to become linen. This is called a strick. It's had all of its processing done to it to extract these lovely fibers from the plant, and now it's ready for spinning. So that's where we are going to pick up our journey with this beautiful, beautiful fiber. I have a video all about restoring this antique wheel, so I'll link that to the description of this video. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it, other than to say that this was probably made in the United States during the 1800s. It has been restored, some of its pieces have been replaced, and one of the pieces that I did have replaced, it's actually 3 pieces. This is a distaff. Notice how it's not sharp and pointy. Disney, I'm not falling asleep. I'm fine. If you find an antique spinning wheel, it's likely that it's a flax wheel and that its primary purpose would have been to spin flax. And it's likely that these 3 pieces are missing. They're a little bit unwieldy and they're easy to pull off. If you don't know what you're looking at, it just looks like a pile of pretty sticks and not an important tool. But this is a very important tool for spinning flax. So let's talk about why that is. When we spin fibers, we are pulling or attenuating, or the term we usually use, drafting those fibers, which means we're pulling out a few of those fibers at a time in a consistent way. We add twists to that, and now we basically have yarn. To know where we can hold on to those fibers, we check something called the staple length. I'm using this wool alpaca blend to demonstrate what I'm talking about here. When I hold my hands close together and pinch and tug, I can't get it to pull apart. But if I move my hands further apart, it pulls apart very easily as soon as I start to tug on it. Why is that? Because this is my staple length, right there. When I was pinching here, I wasn't holding on to these fibers. This hand was holding on to these fibers, and so they easily pulled apart. If I do that same exercise on my flax, I'm gonna have to go pretty far to find the staple length, because this entire strick is the entire length of these plants. They were this tall. So because this staple length is so long, I would need like another person or another arm or something holding onto that end of it so that I can spin and pull the little pieces out from this end of it. And that is accomplished with a distaff. That's my 3rd arm for spinning flax. But before I put this flax onto that distaff and start spinning, I need to get it ready for spinning. Now, there's so much mythology and legend and lore about flax. There's a lot of superstitions where if you didn't finish what you were supposed to spin for the day, there were entities that would arrive at your house and do terrible things to you, tangle your flax, or maybe stir your intestines in a pot of soup, or wild stuff. Not the fluffy fairy tales. These are intense, but I think that there's a reason that those things exist. One reason is that if you leave your flax on your distaff for a long time, which I have done because sometimes I'm doing a project and then I switch to a different project and I have a lot of stuff going on and I don't come back to it right away, it tangles very easily. And so I can imagine that if you have a young person in your home who's doing the spinning and you need them to finish spinning that so that it doesn't get all messed up and tangled, and you know, you might have a story about if you don't get that done before bed, a terrible thing is gonna happen. So I can absolutely see where a lot of these came from. And that is also probably, in my best guess, the reason why we have the sort of folk wisdom that you should not put more on your distaff than you can spin in a day. I am not going to spin all of this in a day. This is quite a lot of fiber here. So I am going to take a finger of flax, which I guess would be about, that's probably where that came from, like, you know, a finger size, off of this strick. And there's no problem doing that. I'm just gonna, I just pulled it apart right here. I'm a flaxen-haired maiden. Remember how I said this is the entire length of the plant? Ideally, we are going to have the root side of the plant at the top of the distaff and the side that held the flowers on the other end that we are spinning from, in the direction towards the root end. Sometimes it's hard to tell. I've set it up backwards before. Basically, it doesn't spoil the spin. It's just that once you start to get to the end, it starts to have these little fluffy bits. These fluffy bits contribute to that tangling I was talking about, and they get very snarly. They're not really the length of the flax. As you work your way up, if they're all at the top, they kind of clump up there. So ideally, we want them at the bottom where they can just kind of work their way out. It's not the end of the world, but if you can, try and figure out which end is a little bit more sturdy and which end is a little more fluffy. That was the fluff I was using to figure out which end was which. And now I pulled it off and I can't remember. I'm pretty sure this is the root end though. I am going to go grab a ribbon and I am going to tie the ribbon to this end. I don't want to go right at the very tip. I'll go a little ways in. And I don't need much here. I'm going to take just a little bit of the ribbon and I'm going to tie it around like this. About like that. So I have this much hanging out. I have this much ribbon. And then I am going to put this around my waist like a belt. But I'm gonna get my apron first because this part gets messy. Let's get this ready to spin. I am going to keep this kind of centered on me, and then I'll take the rest of my ribbon. And this is, if you're wondering, it's a 1.5 inch width ribbon, and it is the full length off of the ribbon. So it's about, what is that? That's about, I think, 3 yards. It's just a regular, like a regular spool of ribbon. Remember that twist is basically like glue. And so this is naturally going to be twisted up because that's how it's been stored and how it's been sitting. So we want to untwist that so that it's easier to pull it apart. If I give it a little shake, it'll open up easier. So then I kind of find what's at the edge here, and I'm going to pinch just a few fibers and kind of pull them out. I want them to be real wispy so that I can kind of see through it. And I'm going to lay that out like in a fan shape across my lap. And then once I get to the end over here, I'm going to, that's right, come back across. I find it easiest to kind of switch hands as I go back and forth. You'll kind of see what I mean in a second here. I'm just gonna keep going back and forth like this until I have spread these all out over my lap in very thin, wispy, see your lap through it sheets. If I see any pieces that still look clumped up, like I can't see through those, I'm gonna just kind of pick those apart and open it up. It's okay if it's not all laying straight at the bottom. You can always just kind of pull it over your knees and kind of yank on the sides, and that'll help spread out the base of what you're working on. If it does get snarled up at the bottom so that you can't keep fanning it open, that's fine. You can just kind of finger pick your way through to undo any snarls and get rid of, if you have any clumpy bits, like this is a clumpy bit of shorter broken stuff, just pull that out. Up at the top, this is sort of naturally split apart, and this one is still kind of twisted. So I'm gonna untwist that, because the twist at the top is just gonna make it harder to draft from later while I start spinning. So don't want that. There. Keep that bottom opened up there. And there we have it. That is ready to put on the distaff. I'm going to undo the belt, but I'm not going to undo the part that is holding on to the fibers. I don't want to drop it, because at that point, if I drop it, then it's a tangled mess. As it is, it's an organized mess. I'm going to let most of the web of fibers sort of dangle down the edge of my table. Then I'm going to take this little bit of ribbon here and tie it to the top of the distaff. And I just want to have it nice and secure up there. All right, now I'm ready to kind of roll this up onto my distaff. I want this to end with kind of a conical shape, and I need to keep adjusting my ribbon so it kind of stays around here. There's a knob on the distaff about here, and that will help hold the ribbon so it doesn't slip. I don't want this whole thing sliding down while I'm tugging on it for spinning. I want all the fibers to be organized so that they're not just flying off everywhere. I want them to come out when I pull them out, not when they feel like waking up with bedhead, because that's what this looks like. I can kind of pull this open at the base here, and that sort of allows me to have good control over the drafting so that I'm not pulling giant clumps while I'm spinning. All this extra ribbon up here. Some people crisscross it up and down. You can do that, it's pretty. When you can kind of feel where the knobs are on the distaff, it helps to wrap around at those points. They kind of keep everything from slipping and sliding. I'm going to use a very traditional method of securing my ribbon, which is just to use a pin, like a sewing pin. And she's ready to spin. I recently took this wheel to the spa, meaning I took everything off of them, including the drive band, and did some wood conditioning and dusting and all of that. So I need to put a drive band on real quick. This is called a double drive. I have a video that is a very deep mechanical dive into the double drive, and it really is an ingenious system. This is not two separate drive bands. This is one drive band going all the way around the wheel in a figure 8 configuration. So it goes around once, gotta tighten it up a little bit. So it goes around once sitting in this groove, or this one, it doesn't matter, just one of these, and then it goes around again sitting in the groove that's attached to the bobbin. That part's very important. In the olden days, people would splice their drive bands. I'm not gonna do that. Started with a surgeon's knot to kind of secure it. Hopefully that's tight enough. And then I usually just tie it around a couple more times just to secure it and make it a little less likely to unravel. I'm using hemp yarn for my drive band, and it's the first time I've used this type of yarn for my drive band, but I've been wanting to experiment with it, so I will let you all know how it goes in the future once I've had some time to test it out. Waxing the drive band is easier once it's already on. This is just beeswax, so mind your own. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm just gonna, this wheel's actually a little tricky because these arms fly out here so far and they almost touch. So I'm gonna hold it on the other side, but I'm gonna tighten this up a little first. Okay, here we go. And that's really it. Now it's waxed. Because this is a figure eight, it got both sides because it's just going around and then coming back around. And always remember, put oil on the stuff that is moving. I think historically people probably would have put actual grease on some of these moving parts, but grease is so messy. But if you look at a lot of these old antique wheels on the this is the drive wheel, right? And these are the drive wheel supports. If you look at these supports on a lot of old wheels, you'll see the grease stains and oil stains, and that's partly how you can tell if it's been well used and loved. If you're spinning flax, a question that you will inevitably be asked is, do you wet spin or do you dry spin? There are reasons why you might do one or the other, but when I'm spinning line, I like to do a wet spin. This isn't water though. This is flax gel. I make this by putting water in a small pan on the stove. I put about a tablespoon of flax seeds into the water, heat it up till it just starts to boil, turn it off of the heat and let it sit, and then I strain out the seeds, and I have a jar that I can keep in the fridge for about a week, up to a week. I don't really go longer than that, and if it starts to get cloudy, then you should probably throw it out. But you can make up a good batch if you plan on doing a whole lot of flax spinning. I'm gonna pour some out just so it's easier to get to into just a little dish. The reason why I wet spin is because this helps to put everything in order, slick it down, it prevents flyaways, and it really makes a nice, shiny, smooth, strong yarn in the end, which is what I want from line flax. Why are we going through all this work if we're not gonna spin a beautiful spool of linen? A leader is a piece of string that you put onto the bobbin to get your spin started so that the fiber that you are spinning has something to hold on to while getting wound onto the bobbin. I do not tie my leader to my bobbin. The reason is because when I'm pulling off my fibers, the bobbin can start spinning really fast, and if it's tied on there when it gets to the end, it can yank, and I don't want to hurt my equipment. So I crisscross it back and forth and secure it with its own friction and tension. Once you crisscross it a couple times and get it started like that, you're really good to go. I have you set up as if you were sitting on a bench right next to me. So pull up a chair, friends. We're gonna spin some flax. Let's talk about how the drafting is working. This part here, this is the important part, because on that side, it's flax, and on that side, it's linen. And this is where the magic happens. So while I am pulling these fibers from the distaff, I don't want to, for example, be pulling from all the way up here. This is so long. If I'm pulling from all the way up here, I will start getting clumps, and it'll be very frustrating. If my hand is up here at all, it's not to pull things out except for the very first pull. After that, it's to hold things back. See, I'm not pinching, I'm just kind of using my hand as a rake to kind of rake it back up there. With this hand, I'm dipping ever so often into my flax gel just to kind of keep my fingers damp. So I'll take another dip. So if I see that I've got it too thin, I might reach up and pinch off a couple fibers that are kind of dangling down here. But I want to get the ones that are close and not the ones that are all the way up in the distaff. Look how fine this thread is that I'm spinning. Isn't that beautiful? I'm gonna weave this eventually, and it's gonna make a beautiful, beautiful woven piece of cloth. I usually find that I can work further away from the distaff than I think I can. I think that because so much of us have had most of our spinning practice with wool, we are thinking of a staple length that's a couple inches. And these fibers, remember, are maybe even an entire yard long. So we can really keep our hand further back than we think we can. This is a warning because I messed up. If your hands are wet with flax gel, do not touch anything on the distaff. Only touch the twisty part. If you do, you'll get a clump that you cannot undo. So let's talk about what to do if your spin comes apart. How do you join it back together? Because that's an important thing to know. All you have to do is take, this is my working piece, and it ends about here. So I'm giving it maybe about a foot. I'm gonna take it and I am going to just stick it on there. Like it just lay it on there. Oh look, now it's a fiber again. Back with his friends. So I'll take it and just pinch a little bit of whatever is at the very bottom hanging off, and just kind of hold them up next to each other. Now I'll get another dip of my flax gel. And that's it. It's joined. There is a type of spinning wheel. It's just one treadle, but it has two flyers, this part. So presumably why it's called a gossip wheel is that the idea is that maybe two people would be sitting next to each other while they were spinning and they would be gossiping or whatever. So that doesn't make sense to me. I could never, I mean never, be the spinner that was not in control of the treadle. That would make me absolutely bonkers. So much of everything that's happening here is under my control because it has to be. Because if I'm messing up, right, I need to be able to stop. And if I'm not messing up, I really don't want to stop, because then that would mess me up. Like, I just don't know how anyone could possibly be the spinner who doesn't have their foot on the treadle. And then I feel like I was vindicated because I found a picture of a woman spinning with a gossip wheel, and she was spinning with flax in each hand at the same time. And I was like, yes, that makes sense. I could absolutely see spinning with a hand on, I'm crisscrossing now, but I could absolutely see spinning two bobbins at the same time. And I really, 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 really need to get my hands on one of those wheels, those gossip wheels, for some experimental archaeology purposes. Someday. It's a dream. Someday. I feel like I've been inching closer and closer to the distaff, so I'm gonna actually swing this out a little bit. I'm not sure if it was swinging towards me or if I just started doing that by habit because we were chatting about gossip wheels. I got down to like one strand and that's too thin, so I just pulled it, backed it up, and just kind of set that around there. And then start again. There we go, so that I have enough fibers coming together. This is a bad habit that I have. I need to call myself out here because I don't want you to copy me in my bad habits. I very often tend to pinch and pull back. You can do that, but you get little clumps. Just knock it backwards. Don't pinch and drag it backwards because that clumps it up. And it goes back to that whole like flax tangles when you're not looking situation. Again, I think it's just my muscle memory from spinning wool types of fibers that the pinching to draft is just what my hands do, because hour to hour, I've spent much more time spinning wool than I have spinning flax. Although I am making a good dent in my flax spins. So that's very exciting. And I am really excited to share all of this knowledge with all of you. And I hope it's helping. So I'd love for you to let me know in the comment section. Tell me if you've ever spun linen before, if you plan to spin linen, spin flax to make linen, right? Let me know what you're up to. Why are you here? Did the algorithm send you this video and it's 2 a.m. and you're like in the weird part of the internet now? And now we're gonna switch to this other flax wheel I have back here. This is a Country Craftsman and it's a replica of a colonial era spinning wheel. And there's a video about that one if you want more details. But I recently finished a flax spin on that wheel, and so I'm going to take you to the footage of that so you can see what happens when everything gets finished. That wheel does have a bit of a difference because it has a cage distaff. This one could set up with a cage. I have the wood to stick in there to do it, but I didn't, because this is what I prefer if I have a large quantity of flax that I'm spinning. It keeps it more organized, but as you work down to the very last bit, it kind of falls down in between these. These are just meant to keep it open and easier to draft it out from. That's all. But when it gets down to the end, some adjustments are needed. So it's gonna be the same whether or not you have a cage or just the stick. A distaff really is a stick. That's really what it is. This is what it looks like when you start to get to the end of the load on the distaff. It was kind of like there was like a thicker wad right here, and looking up here you can see it's still very, very line. It's very combed out, and so I kind of went up with my fingers here and just kind of pulled this out, and I realized that this is toe. I'm betting that this is some stuff that just kind of fuzzed off and broke off as I was drafting things out, and it's just the little bits that are still stuck in there. Now I'm pulling and I'm starting to get some longer things, you can see. Kind of pulled out. There's a little bit of line in there, but most of this is toe. This fluffy stuff here. There's not much left. There's just this. But as I was going, all of the longer stuff got spun off, and so it's getting shorter. Here's what the bobbin's looking like. It's got some glossiness to it, and it's beautiful. Oh, that just makes me so happy. I'm guessing there's probably a couple 100 yards on here because this is packed. This is so dense. It is like solid. I can barely wiggle it. Like, it's really tight. It is really solid. I have this much left to go. I ran it over my mini card a little bit just to kind of get any of the other sort of short toe out of there. And I'll pull these long bits out because they're still okay. They're line enough to be line. Turning my hand this way feels more natural because this is how it would come off the distaff. And then, ooh, yeah, I need to give myself like way longer drafting zone. There we go. That's a little better. Huzzah! That's done. You big, beautiful bobbin, you. Well, friends, I'm gonna get back to my spinning and listening to my audiobook. Someone thought that Dungeon Crawler Carl might be the type of humor that Mark and I enjoy. And yes, you're absolutely correct. We're both listening to it. I listen faster than he does, so I'm on like book 5. But Dungeon Crawler Carl is like the Hunger Games had a baby with Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the Godfather is Duke Nukem, and the babysitter is Sassy from Homeward Bound. That's the best I can do. I'm gonna get back to my spinning, and I will wish you all happy spinning.